and World Commission report. And from the very beginning, the concept remains the same, which means this is development that is that working now? Okay, I hope. So then in 1992, we have the Rio conference in Brazil and the agenda that brought the, and then in 2000 we had the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, to reach the 2015 SDGs, which, as you know, identified 17 areas for improvement: hunger, no poverty, equality, and protecting the sea, the land, and having sustainable practices in industry, energy, water, and hunger, consumption, no poverty, equality, and protecting the sea, the land, and having sustainable practices in industry, energy. 23, just a screenshot of the Africa report 2023, and which actually focused on only. And in the region of East Africa, we see that there is progress in terms of clean water, clean energy, sustainable cities, partnerships, but we're not going to be there. In terms of research, there is interesting work until 20, which shows that most of the production in academia is focusing on practices of SDGs, but not so much on theory, which is the green line. And this means that this gap taking many concepts of sustainable development for granted. And then there was a peak of production in academia in 2018, and from then a decrease, which is something to be discussed. On the challenges, you can see here how the sea is rising and is already affecting the coastal areas around the world, including Tanzania. And the IPCC Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has been reporting since 1990. So it is certain that the sea is rising. We don't know how much and how much is going to accelerate. This will depend on the of the planet, which is expecting to be 1.5 degrees centigrade more by the early 2030s, and we are almost there. So it can get worse from 30 to 1 meter to several meters higher, which means that the coastal areas where most of the population in the world lives will be affected. Also the infrastructure and the ecosystem. However, we also have constraints, and global debt has reached in 2023 $97 trillion globally. And although developing countries make a third of the total since 2010, so the global financial crisis has grown twice as fast as developed countries. And this means that the debt load leads to fiscal constraints. So although many countries, most of us, want to do better in order to make the planet sustainable, sincerely, we don't have the resources because we have fiscal constraints. And then reporting from the UN, which are uh, um, estimating the costs. And just on 3 SDGs, we would need on food systems, we would need $6.1 trillion per year to fulfill these 3 SDGs on zero hunger and protecting sea and land, which is about 20% of the global GDP. So it's just for 3 of them, it's a huge task. Now, two other key things: inequalities. So unfortunately, we see deepening inequalities, disparities between urban and rural areas across the world. Interesting process, dynamics that has been taking place since the 1990s. This is a screenshot of the work by Lucas Chancel from the Paris lab, which is very interesting. That shows, oh, thank you, thank you. That shows that since 1990, actually the carbon emissions that we should be reducing is concentrating in the very, very rich people. Just 1% of the global population now accounts for 23% of total global emissions. So that's one interesting dynamics. And the other one, that there is a change between disparities in carbon emissions between countries, which before was more like developed countries and less developed ones, and then is increasing within countries, so in different regions in the same country. Right now, in July 2024, in the G20 meeting and the IMF, there has been a consensus reached. I don't know if you have seen the news, by which they call a global tax on the ultra rich or the very, very rich, this 1%, hoping to be able to have some more funding to compensate those who are losing, who are more vulnerable in the South, in the islands, and to prepare for the transition that we need to undertake. Where are cooperatives in this? So first of all, cooperatives have the word sustainable development in the seventh principle. So one of our principles, the cooperative principle, says cooperatives work for the sustainable development of their communities through policies approved by their members. So it really is the responsibility and the will of the members to do something about it. This was incorporated in 1995 in the ICA General Assembly of the whole cooperative movement in Manchester. And why was this done? Well, according to Macpherson, in the book Macpherson and Paz, he said that this is to remind cooperators that the market or the market are working for the community at large as well, to make it sustainable for all, and to include considerations which are also social and environmental. And how is this possible? Because cooperatives are different in three key ways from investor-led for-profit companies: on purpose, control, and surplus allocation. So as you know, probably the purpose is defined by the members and is not only just economic or for profit. So it does include the needs of the members and their communities. The control means that is controlled by the people, by the members themselves. And surplus allocation is done according to the usage of the members with the cooperative, and also is reinvested usually, generally, goes back to the members, the community, and the local economy. So this is extremely important. This has been recognized in the ILO Recommendation 193 of 2002, which of course recognizes the duality, the dual nature of members who are self-managing their undertaking. And of course, the business is both an association and a business, an entrepreneurial. And this was voted, as you know, the ILO is a tripartite organization right now. And it was voted total consensus by all entrepreneurs, trade unions, and government, except for two abstentions that were not due to the text. They explained one entrepreneur government, like Venezuela at that time. The other one was from Australia. And what is very important is that was for the first time in history, an ILO recommendation included in full the standards of a non-profit association, which is, of course, linked to the history of the ILO. So we have the full ICA identity in the annex. Heritage of humanity since 2016, and this was thanks to Germany. And I think they collected about 2 million signatures. Maybe cooperatives make between not more than 10% of national GDP in every country, maybe 8, 7, 6%, and so on. But when we go down, we can see that cooperatives are very significant. So, for example, in India, Amul, the Gujarat Cooperative Milk Marketing Federation, ranks eighth in the world among the top 20 global dairy processors right now. In the US, agricultural cooperatives ensure the livelihoods of millions of farmers because they account for 25 share of total marketing agricultural produce. The European cooperative banks ensure about a quarter of all deposits and loans and about 20% of retail banking. But also it's important that they ensure one third of SMEs financing. And as you know, the small and medium enterprises make up for most jobs between 70 in the world. In terms of employment, it's very difficult to know. We don't have full data. The SICOPA 2017 second global report with fieldwork in 10 countries has estimated that cooperatives, for example, in Germany, 90% of bakers are members of cooperatives. So what do? They are independent producers, but they come together to have just in time flour. So they don't keep stocks, and they can also uh, buy the best machinery or what they need in the housing cooperative of dwellers. So they are the members who live in their own housing. They build and they manage their own housing dwellings, whether apartments or houses. They make it cheaper from 25% to 55% than any other option in Switzerland. And most of the Swiss people are renters. So this is very important for them. And so it's the most affordable option in the country. So we are talking about access to housing. Types of cooperatives, I won't go, it's very just briefly to mention a few of them. I just mentioned producer cooperatives, marketing cooperatives, but electrical cooperatives are very important. So for example, in Germany, renewable cooperatives have done a great job. Right now in Europe, they have surpassed the providing energy sources to Europe more than oil and gas from various countries in Europe. And in the US, they cover 3/4 of the total land of the US. So they are the ones who provide electricity and also now like Wi-Fi to the citizens in the country. And then, for example, we have in many, many countries, most countries in Latin America, many countries in Europe, and for example, in Quebec, they are also important, cooperatives of children in schools. And these cooperatives of children, they manage their own activities by themselves, guided by teachers, and they learn how to manage cooperatives from a young age about leadership and about democracy. But there are new ones coming out. So people are inventing new cooperatives right now. We have multi-stakeholder cooperatives. That means different members that need to balance the interests in the same cooperative. We have cooperatives of self-employed, people who are independent workers or professionals, but they will stream their revenues through a cooperative by which they access the status of employee. And then they have a better pension, better health system and services. We have cooperative platforms, and then we have something very interesting called collective interest cooperatives, the SIC in France, and community cooperatives in Italy. So now we will talk briefly about 4 areas in which I have done research and how we link to cooperatives. So as the minister mentioned before, the world is now organized in value chains. So since 2010, more than 50% of all imports of manufacturers and 70% of services are now intermediate goods to others. A typical company will use 35 contractors from different parts of the world to arrive to one product. Now global competition takes place between value chains, not between products. So then how can we study value chains and then where to place cooperatives? Well, in a work I've done with a professor while I was a professor in Canada, we did research on Guatemala value chains and coffee. And we can analyze value chains according to business models and according to governance mechanisms. So in terms of business models, the traditional one is, of course, for profit, and the sustainable one includes social and environmental aid.